Good afternoon, all, and once again, we welcome you to this week session of SOCAA-SheTrades MasterClass webinar series for avocado, French beans, and peas value chains. This series are gracefully brought to you by a partnership between the International Trade Center, which is a SheTrades Commonwealth project, and the Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors of Kenya, referred to as SOCAA. And just for clarity, for those who may not be aware of these two organizations, ITC SheTrades is an initiative that seeks to promote and connect particularly women enterprises or entrepreneurs or small and medium businesses to global opportunities. It also seeks to provide them with a platform to interact and access available business opportunities that cut across diverse business sphere, and more so in the horticultural subsector. Women enterprises can mutually engage with the buyers of produce and services, and also work towards building capacity for their own sustainable growth. SheTrades also, or ITC, also collaborates with the like-minded organizations, and in this instance, through the Society of Crop and Agribusiness Advisors, we bring you this webinar series in which we will disseminate a lot of information, mainly professional advice that matters on matters of crop productivity, crop safety, and applicable standards in crop production. So we also will tackle market access for the same. This afternoon, we will be looking at market access for French beans, a crop that is known to all of us as one of the top horticultural crops, of course, that generates foreign exchange for this country. It's also a top employment provider for our citizens. To start us off, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. And the panelists will lead us today in identifying available market opportunities and how to access those markets. We have both Mr. Apollo Award and Lydia Kimani, who will briefly introduce themselves to us before we proceed. So I take this moment to ask, let me start with the lady, Lydia. Would you tell us a bit about yourself before we go to Apollo next? Lydia.
Okay. Good afternoon. To be here once again. I am an agricultural economist by training with a special focus on private sector development and driving competitive agriculture. I'm also an executive director for Agribusiness for African markets that is mainly focusing on driving global, achieving globally competitive enterprises for focusing on marginalized groups, women and youth in agriculture. I'm also the liaison officer at the Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors, and thank you for having me. I look forward to a very invigorating.
Lydia, are you still there? Okay, I guess Lydia has finished introducing herself. Apollo, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Joshua. Hello.
Okay, I guess. Hello. Yeah, Lydia, you're back. Okay, can we proceed with Apollo? Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Apollo War. I am an agricultural economist by profession. I'm the chairman of Fresh Produce Exporters Association of Kenya, and also one of the board director of Koliasi P, and an agripreneur, so as they call it, agripreneur. I invested in fresh produce. I'm happy to be making some presentation during this session, and I hope we can have very constructive interactions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Apollo. I think both panelists are quite experienced guys in this industry, and therefore we will learn a lot from them, and we are expecting a very good interaction amongst us. Let me take just a few minutes to help us to review what are expectations today. I think every function that happens always come along with some expectations. You as the audience have your expectations, and we as the organizers of the function of the webinar have our own expectations. Of course, there are goals to be met, and one of the goals, of course, for us is to enhance knowledge for medium and small scale enterprises, and especially those working in the sector of avocados, beans, and peas. Of course, there are those who work on post-harvest handling and also safety issues. They all have their expectations. So, of course, we have goals towards that, and that is the reason that this webinar has been set up. Of course, we also expect to champion some sustainable, inclusive trade practices. So all these practices, all encompasses, is all brought in together to enable those who are involved within that chain to acknowledge them and practice them. So that is one of the things that we would like to, is one of our goals. And of course, we will be also promoting some initiatives which help in sustainable developments towards food losses, towards food waste, and of course, towards the general development of the sector. So we would like now to proceed to the proper presentation. And just for mention, we have sent out a link, which is mainly a poll survey link. We would like to also understand what the audience are feeling or understanding about the whole webinar. So we request those who are in to log into that link. It's a very quick survey, which will not take you more than 3 or 4 minutes. So we are very much interested in that because that helps us to improve our future engagement with you. I think that's about it for introduction for today. Now I would like to call upon Apollo to take us through what he has for us today as far as market access for French bean is concerned. Apollo, you have been in this segment for, I think, quite a while. So, and you're also the chair of FPIC, and therefore you have a lot of knowledge in your fingertips that would help us to understand what market access is, especially for French beans in this segment. So Apollo, kindly take the floor and lead us through.
Thank you very much, Joshua, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I'll not be able to do a video because I have a bit of challenges with the networks and electricity where I am at the moment. So I would just allow me to do more of a speech presentation. And thank you for this. What I'm supposed to talk about is optimizing market access for French beans. And this is largely one of the most valuable horticultural crops that we do out of Kenya, especially horticultural vegetables, because this is the most significant basket that we do supply outside Kenya. In fact, the French beans are usually called Kenyan beans in certain markets because of the popularity of a product that comes from Kenya. French beans is an all-season crop growing throughout from January to January in this country, although we do have certain challenges production challenges during certain times of the year in the dry periods of February and March, and then a bit of during the wet conditions as well around May, June, and November, December. But that does not, we do have a bit of a drop in production at those points. But now our biggest market for French beans is in Europe with Holland, UK, and France being one of the largest markets for this commodity. And it is produced largely by smallholder producers. So for one to be able to have a proper market access, the certain criteria that one requires. Number one, you must literally have control of the production chain. By production chain, it means at least you need to understand who is going to supply your product. And by knowing who is going to supply, there are certain requirements as well that you need for what they need to be able to supply you. And what the market usually requires is that there has to be traceability for product, there has to be transparency, and there has to be compliance to the EU requirements or to the market requirements. Since Europe is our largest market, then the biggest tendency is for us to comply with European regulations. Currently, French beans have a bit of a challenge. French beans from Kenya have a challenge, especially on pests, pesticide exceedance. There's a new regulation that has put Kenya on a 10% sampling, so that any French beans that is being supplied, 10% has to be subjected to pesticide screening. And in the event of an interception or in the event of an exceedance, then there are certain border controls that are put in place. The product, if that does not conform to those, will be rejected at the cost of the importer, and probably that is also passed down to the exporter and translates all the way to the producers. So one of the critical things that one needs to have is to ensure that you have secured your sourcing plan. By securing it, it means you have producers that are able to meet due diligence requirements. They are able to manage pests and diseases in a responsible manner in order to ensure that the pest residues are not detected. That means one needs to invest in proper crop husbandry and crop management practices that would be able to ensure that the practices of managing any potential issues that arise would be controlled. Customers would ask you for questions like that. Customers would ask you for global gap certification. Coming next year from 2021, there are new EU requirements as well on social parameters as well as environmental issues. As these laws are coming into force, it means that any customers to Europe would have to guarantee that they are able to meet social requirements. So one needs also to familiarize themselves on what are the key social requirements and what are the key environmental requirements. Part of this process has been made easy through getting to certifications, various certifications. So for example, if one has global gap certification, then you're also able to encompass a bit of the social aspects and the good environmental practice schedules. So this would be the things that would be able to enhance market access. We have facing lots of competition from regions that are close to Europe, primarily because of proximity to trade with Europe. So West Africa and North Africa have becoming a major competition to Kenya due to freight costs. And now our biggest challenge now comes into our competitiveness through pricing structure. And that means that our products, by volume have continued to go down. French beans market has continued to shrink, although in volume, but by value has continued to go up. So this means that we have capacity to now consider other aspects beyond just supplying French beans. But what sort of value add potential do we need to look at? Whether we are doing pre-packs, whether we are doing mixed packs, whether we are doing ready to eat. Those are the places where now we have significant headroom to make a business case. Other than competing with the bulk products that is being supplied from the West African and the North African business hubs. So we have some of those initiatives that we may need to do to optimize our access to and our maintenance to these markets. And this will be the things that we need to do. How do we know markets? Do we know the regulations?
Apollo, we are losing you somehow.
Sorry, have you gotten me? Am I back?
Please repeat your last statement.
I don't remember the last statement, but what I'm saying is just for us, in order for us to maintain our place in the marketplace, is to keep in mind the key aspects of global gap, maintaining that through global gap, and conforming trade through understanding the EU regulations which are coming into force, and then playing a part in terms of having a value add potential for our products, so that we keep a competitive edge through value addition. And by value addition, I'm talking about pre-packs, I'm talking about having mixed packs and probably ready to eat and convenience packs for consumers. If you look at the overall household sizes in Europe now, it's becoming to 2 to 3, between 1 and 3, so to speak, within a household. So if you're selling products, then it has to be within those convenience packs that would be able to now meet the consumer's capabilities. And those are the things. The biggest miss that we find ourselves in this country most of the time is we tend to be speculative traders than very strategic. And being speculative means we go out there, identify a customer, and we feel like we can grow as much as possible and then sell. Yet, the most critical thing is we need also to work with customers who have the capability to work on the demand or supply projections. This way, we are able then to manage issues of losses and wastages that come into play. I'm just looking at this year, and of course, COVID is playing a big part. But if you look at this year, there's a lot of quite a high percentage of French beans or crop that is going to waste as a result of less uptake of this crop. And therefore, for most of the exporters that do not have the capacity to now work through their supply forecasts and demand projections, then product goes to waste, putting farmers at a very queer positions. They have product, but they're unable to sell it. And these are the sort of issues that we're looking at in order to ensure that we can manage and run a business that you are able to have significant projections and forecast. So I think that is the place that we can play within this place in order to optimize our market access for French beans and peas. I think, Joshua, I will save the rest of my minutes for Q&A, and if there is any other issues that may need to add, I believe those will be included in the next point of discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Apollo, for that brief, very precise, concise information that you've delivered to us. I may just, as a continuation, maybe just ask you one question from just your presentation. You've mentioned, value addition, especially the value addition potential. And there you've looked at issues like loose pack and pre-packs and, all sorts of packs. In your own opinion, how are we progressing, or how are we developing on different levels? That is, are we seeing growth in the loose pack business, or is it more geared towards the pre-packs and the value-added systems?
If we segment Europe, and probably now assuming that now UK is not part of Europe following Brexit, but if you segment it and still think that UK is part of it, well, UK is largely, consumers are largely retail oriented, and therefore they would go for the retail packs. And if you're doing anything retail packs, it means there's move towards there's a lot of move towards pre-packs and convenience packs and a lot of mixed packs as well, which are largely, and then if you also look at the various within the consumer range, again, you'd be looking at the sort of consumer who would prefer more or less ready to eat, 10 minutes to prepare a meal or something like that. So there's a move towards more of ready to eat and prepared packs and pre-packs especially for the UK consumer. Now, when you go to the continent, it's largely still very traditional. Although then there's still more of a move towards getting pre-packed products because handling and people do not want to handle food so much. They would just want to go pick a pack and go home with it. So for Kenya, our biggest niche lies in moving towards pre-packs and away from loose packs, because of one, competition coming in through the North and West Africa, and two, the value of pre-packs is definitely much higher in comparison to loose packs. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Apollo, for that answer. And yeah, I think I want to engage you a little bit more, just one or two more questions. And this question is on the compliance issues, because you mentioned that at least 10% of whatever we export has to be sampled. How does that figure of 10% affect us in terms of profitability, and also in terms of the volumes that we send? Because 10% is really a big consignment. Does it apply to every consignment that gets there? And if so, have we tried to quantify what that 10% is in terms of value, and how does that affect us going forward?
Thanks, Joshua. For every consignment that we ship out of this country right now, 10% will be held for sampling. And we may sometimes say 10%, but it's even more than 10% that is held for sampling. Now, when a product is held for sampling, it means it will take between 24 to 48 hours before it is released to the market if the product did not have any issue. But if the product had issues, then this product will be destroyed at the cost of the importer. Of course, the importer will pass down that cost to the exporter. What this means is that where we were at in Kenya, initially, we were business as usual. We used to have lots of, everybody wanted to do French beans. If you had a piece of land, everybody wanted to grow French beans, and they would use whichever product to manage pests and diseases. Now, Europe is handling, has a new regulation that comes in. Initially, it used to be risk-based, but now they've identified and they're saying now it is hazard-based. Now, hazard-based, what it implies is that any product that has been classified as injurious to human health or potentially injurious to human health has been withdrawn for application within any crop protection products. And therefore, we have a limited range of arsenal to manage our pests or diseases during our production process. So I am Mr. Farmer here with pest disease challenges. I am Mr. Exporter here with an order book, and then an importer on your neck to supply products. If the exporter does not have clear controls of the supply base and would just go to any Dick, Joe, and Harry to supply them with the product, the risk of interception is very high. In the event of any interception, currently what the Kenyan authorities have enforced is that once you have an interception, then you lose your access to what is called the electronic certification system, or the access to FITO, which means that you will not be able to export over a certain period of time until you are able to guarantee that your food safety systems and controls are robust. So of course, with that time spent and all those things, there is definite loss in production and loss in revenue. These are the implications of this new regulation and of this 10%, because the chances of interception, if the system is not robust and if the system is not known and the sources are not very clear, the implications are that the chances to have an interception are very high. And of course, the loss of business that goes with it. If you have 3 interceptions within that follow each other, then the new regulation at KEFIS is that there is no export that is going to happen for the next 1 month. Now, any business that does not do anything within a month, that means your cash flows, everything, all that, the implications to business are very high. And so it is important for anybody who is getting involved in this French beans value chain to understand the overall implications of the 10% regulation or the EU regulations, and then how that is being implemented in this country, in Kenya, for example. That it means that you have to understand what it takes to get products there and what it takes to be able to supply products that are complying to the regulations that have been put in place. So in terms of value, we have not really compounded that value, but it has definitely has a big hit in terms of the number of exporters who are in the business and the number of farmers who are in the business and the volume of beans that are being exported out of this country. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you, Apollo. By the way, what would you say is the level of incidence of those kind of failures to pass the standards?
This year alone, we've seen by June this year, we had quite nearly 20 interceptions, and other interceptions that are very of serious concern, because there are crop protection products that have been withdrawn not only in Europe but have also been are restricted for use in Kenya. But these products were detected in the European borders. So already we have some of those regions that we're looking at right now as a country that we are thinking have very high risk of involvement. Areas like Loitoktok, areas like Kirinyaga and other and border areas where you can have products that have been registered in other countries finding their place here in Kenya and being used by growers here in Kenya. So those are the sort of zoning that is being done, and they're working with authorities to ensure that there is sufficient controls on products that are getting in and out, and how then those affect export commodities. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Apollo. I think, of course, what you've just mentioned brings us to the issues of safety, food safety. And the material we use on these crops, of course, determines what kind of output we get from them. And as an organization, I know I don't want to involve you very much towards your employer as FPIC, but I think this is still in your docket, and I think it is a nice thing for the audience to understand what really goes on there. What is your perception about how this product or banned products get to these markets? And has your organization thought of how to handle this?
We work very closely with the competent authority structure, that is KEFIS, the Pest Control Products Board, and HCD, in order to sensitize farmers on the responsible use of crop protection products. So the onus is on the farmer, the user, on overall application. However, again, we're working with our members in order to ensure that the only products that have been approved for use in the growing of French beans and growing of peas or any other horticultural products are the ones that are being applied on when it comes to management of pest and disease issues here. So we have a very elaborate campaign that will have to take quite a holistic approach from all stakeholders to push and to preach a gospel of responsible use of crop protection products, and that is identifying using pest product matrix in order to guarantee the overall usage of commodities that are in the country. The other thing is also now we have porous borders, and we also have some crazy farmers around. You know, the pressures also of disease and pest. Who is at the core to advise farmers on the usage of products? Sometimes you find the agrovets being the at the forefront, the first person of inquiry for the farmer to manage certain issues, and that also has a potential issue in translating backwards to the overall quality of the products that we supply. So there's quite a bit of campaign works that need to be done in order to ensure that there's clear, responsible use for crop protection products. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you, Apollo. I think that is a very fair answer from you. And maybe just to give you a break after this question, and this is still on the market access issues. And I'm looking at the small and medium scale organizations or farms. How easy is it for them to get into the market, and especially in terms of registration of the company and the whole process of certification, and of course, finally being given the mandate to export the produce? How easy is that process for a startup business or anybody aspiring to get into that business?
May I not say how easy or how hard? May I probably provide the process or the steps to getting that? Prior to getting an export license, one has to register with HCD. And to register with HCD, one has to go through a process called vetting. Vetting is a process that requires you to identify who are your suppliers of products, what products are you shipping, and where are you sourcing these products from, and do you have a quality management system that is able to now provide a clear-cut way to manage the entire production process. So as soon as you are vetted by HCD that you have the prerequisite requirements, then you are given a license. But a license does not guarantee that one is able to now go straight away and start exporting. You still now have to go and do, especially if you are in the domain of peas and beans, you have to go through a process that is called a food safety audit that is done by KEFIS, the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service. KEFIS will then come and assess the pest pressure and how one is managing the pest pressure. So again, you are required to have the overall pest management strategy as well as a quality management system. So there'll be two sort of audits that will be carried out, one by HCD to get an export license, and one by KEFIS, which is called a food safety audit, to be able to have an access through the provision of phyto through a process of getting an account in the electronic certification system. So that is one. But HCD again requires that to be a grower, you must have you must comply to certain requirements like having global gap or any other standard gap standard that is applicable. So those will be the requirements. So it's an HCD and KEFIS issue. But of course, one has to be a registered business with all the compliances required for any business that is registered. Whether it's KRA with having KRA issues, having the a board that is recognized with people. Those are the preliminary requirements. Have I answered you, Joshua?
Thank you, Apollo. Thank you very much for taking your time to explain some of these things to us. And I think that gives a lot of encouragement to most of us farmers who are aspiring exporters. And therefore, it really outlines what a company needs to do as far as the process to register and to be certified is concerned. Apollo, I'll give you a break for the moment, and maybe we will come back to you later in the session once we get to the question and answer time. I would like to, at this moment, just maybe start by introducing our next speaker or our next presenter. And our next presenter will touch on trade facilitation. I mean, every trade, of course, needs to be facilitated in one way or the other, whether in terms of knowledge or in terms of finance or whichever. And I think our next presenter will take us through that session. We are slightly ahead of time, and therefore, I think, Lydia, I will give you 5 more minutes on top of the time that I'd allocated for you. And so please, if you are ready with your presentation, please kindly carry on from now.
Good afternoon, once again, Joshua, and to the participants. Thank you, Joshua, for being very generous. I really, really appreciate your indulgence. That is amazing. And I also really want to appreciate Apollo's work, because he has made it very easy. It's almost like he has, to an extent, preempted a lot of the things that we will talk about. So it gives sufficient time to also now comprehensively cover the issues of on trade facilitation. So once again, I'll be focusing on issues of trade facilitation, and these are basically the procedures or regulatory documentary compliance in some instances for you as an exporter to be able to ship your goods to the destination market. So that said, I'll request we go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much, Winnie. So to begin with, for us to be able to appreciate the full scope of trade facilitation, it's important that we look at, we have a background and we build it up from there. So you find that the ability, trade facilitation is usually evaluated and using the World Bank's Index of Ease of Doing Business. So that the figure, our slide is just demonstrating the pathway that Kenya has taken to be on improvement of the regulatory requirements for businesses to register or their capacity to even import or export in Kenya over a period of 10 years. So you find that we started out at number 106. At some point, we really deteriorated to 129. We are presently at number 56, and the country's ambition is to become a top 50 ease of doing business in destination. So one of the things that we at this point would like to understand is that while we have seen the progressive rise through the ranks of Kenya in the ease of doing business, you find that the MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprises in the country level do not feel the impact of this ease of doing business. And one of the things that one of the reasons for this is because a lot of our enterprises are largely informal. And I'm like, it's a good thing that Apollo has mentioned the need for you to export. Then one of the requirements is to be a formal business, meaning that you are a registered business, you have a tax, you have met your tax obligations, you have done all that is necessary to establish a formal business in the country. But you find that 80% of the enterprises in Kenya run on an informal way. So that is why we are able to, while we have improved, the small enterprises are not exactly feeling this difference. So you find that this has largely benefited a lot of our foreign direct investors. So while it is supposed to actually be benefiting our smallholder farmers, so this going forward is one of the things that we will need to focus on. And so what is the impact on competitiveness? So as you reduce the regulatory or the bureaucratic procedures that require you to either export, import, or even do business locally, ideally it is supposed to have a revenue implication. That is, as the requirements reduce, subsequently it should increase your profit margin by extension. Then this is also going to be very important to also compare how our leading competitors such as Morocco, Spain, Egypt, Senegal, Guatemala, like Apollo had mentioned that a lot of our competitors in the French beans commodity value chain are in North Africa. So we have Morocco and Egypt, and also Senegal is coming in a close second to those two. So you find that Morocco was number 53, Spain was number 30, Egypt was 114, Senegal was 123, and Guatemala. So meaning that Morocco and Spain are serious contenders for our French bean markets. And what does that mean? Meaning that Morocco already enjoys a shorter distance to Europe, and they are an African country, and they already have a significant fewer documentary procedures for their exports to live compared to Kenya. So that by extension already gives them certain competitive aspects. Spain is already in the European continent, meaning they have no distance, their shipping costs are even much lower than Morocco. And they are at number 30, meaning that their procedures of facilitating trade or ensuring that trade is happening at a much faster and efficient rate is even higher than Kenya. So those are some of the things that even as exporters, we need to also start processing and internalizing and start to understand how can we influence the government through associations to ensure that the regulatory compliance burden is eased on the exporter so that we're able to ship out our goods faster than we have done previously. Next slide, please. So we find that the next slide is looking at our leading export market. So what, just like what Apollo had shared, the UK is our leading destination, then followed by France. So then you find that we have out of the 10, this is just a look at the 10 top 10 market suppliers to, sorry, the leading importers of our French beans. So you find that if the UK, for example, we enjoy, you find that we already enjoy preferential market access. So if anyone else is exporting, then you find that for Kenyan produce, it will go in. We already have a preferential. There are no tariffs, but now some things are changing. So we need to also understand when the UK leaves Brexit, for example, what is the implication of Kenyan of exports to the UK? Will it attract additional duty? Will we retain? Have we negotiated to retain the rates we were enjoying while it was still in the EU? And that kind of thing. Apollo in his presentation also talked about the issues of the transition from the kind of pesticides that Europe is recommending for produce going into their region. So you find that this is informed by their European Green Deal that seeks to transition Europe to a low carbon emitting continent by 2050. So by extension, what they're recommending is more environmentally friendly pest control products. So you find that if they are our leading markets, so you find that significantly a lot of our produce is finding its way into several European countries. So meaning that, and if all of them are embarking on ratifying the Green Deal, then we stand to face significant challenges. Then we also need to understand that with being a tropical climate that is now experiencing warmer temperatures, we have a higher incidence of pests and diseases. that by extension increases the demand that we have on the use of pesticides. So there is need for R&D, a lot of research and innovation. What are the organic or environmentally friendly alternatives? So failure to arriving at these kinds of solutions, then we will see ourselves lose our market, and that will by extension increase market for countries like Morocco and Egypt. So we need to move with speed in ensuring that our production systems, our processes here in the country are very friendly. So luckily for our country, the country also in Kenya, we have embarked on a green growth pathway. So we now have policies, regulations coming into force to ensure that our contribution, our greenhouse gas emissions are reducing. So the country has embarked on a green growth strategy, meaning that all our sectors now are going to be required over time by law to transition from high carbon emissions to low. We also have something that a regulation that is in the offing, that is the extended producer regulations. So by extension, even as exporters, the country is going to, the EU Green Deal also will have expectations that as we export, in what ways are we packaging our exports? If we are using polythene, what other measures are we putting into place to ensure that once the polythene lands in the EU, it will be the obligation of the exporters to ensure that there is a proper disposal of that kind of packaging. So have we started developing alternatives that are biodegradable or are environment friendly? So you find that while it is an environmental intervention, it has a very heavy cost on our ability to access the market. Their regulations and policy processes are now interfering with our ability to do business, and it is on both ends. So even as a producer in the country now, with the extended producer responsibility regulations, the government of Kenya will require you as a smallholder farmer to demonstrate how are you disposing the water that is contaminated with pesticides, because we no longer want to pollute our rivers and our water reservoirs. So those are anticipated increased costs of doing business. Then that also brings into question if those are the impending obstacles that we are facing in the future in the EU, then what ways can we start leveraging on tools like the African Continental Free Trade Area? We noticed that we have Congo and Tanzania in the top 10 market destinations for French beans. So perhaps, and all of them are going to be members and parties, they are state parties to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So what market access opportunities as alternatives are we exploring in the African market? Well, their volumes may be, the value of exports to these countries may be low. In what ways can we increase our access to those kinds of things? So we have those kinds of questions coming into play. So on the one end, how do we ensure continued market access in Europe by ensuring that packaging environment compliance in production and processes are environmentally friendly, so that we have continued market access. And then with tools coming in like alternative markets being brought on board, like the Continental Free Trade Area, what inroads have we started making to ensure that we are enlarging our presence in those kinds of markets? Thank you very much. Just maybe one last thing also is that we now have the American market that is coming into play. So what are some of the opportunities that are there that we have previously not exploited? Then finally, I'd like to, on the issue of comparing the markets in Europe and in the continent, you realize that while Morocco enjoys shorter distances, we may also be penalized for exporting to Europe based on carbon miles. So what are some of the climate change mitigation actions are we taking? Are we encouraging our smallholder farmers, for example, to plant more trees that act as carbon sinks for the miles that come into play when they're exporting to the European market? Then that way we are able to also increase the resilience of our farmers. So you're earning from the exports in Europe, and you also have a potential to earn from carbon credits because you are conducting a mitigation action against greenhouse gas emissions. So those are some of the questions that going forward we need to understand. And from a policy, trade facilitation will now start looking into things like those kinds of policy processes. How are they affecting our competitiveness and continued market access? Next slide, please. Okay. So just a moment. Just go back to the previous one, please. Sorry for that. Okay, so we have the top 10 competitors. So this is what we will be looking at. So now this is what we were addressing. So we see Spain, Egypt, Guatemala, that kind. We have already discussed that at length in the previous one. And then maybe just a quick one here is to also mention that other additional factors that we need to take into account is that with the exit of the UK from the EU, so for Morocco and Egypt, they have free trade agreements between their countries and the UK. What this means is that they have they enjoy preferential access to that market. So by extension, if they exit and they place a premium or increase the amount of tariffs that we are paying to access the European market in the absence of an FTA, what does that mean for our Kenyan businesses? So going forward, those are some of the things that we also need to factor in. Next one, please. So there was a question on how many what is the process of getting registered. So I took the liberty of just picking this up from the InfoTrade portal, and you can access it. So in order for your product to leave the country, you need, it takes a total of 49 steps, and you need to go through 17 institutions. From there, out of your movement through the 17 institutions, you will get a total of 13 results. And this entire process from start to finish requires 39 documents. So if you recall from the first slide, one of the things that we need to start looking at, for example, how many steps does it take in Morocco, in Egypt, in Spain? So that's why we started with the ease of doing business graph, so that we also understand if it takes 30 steps in Morocco and 20 steps in Spain. So you can see by extension that difference in the number of documentary, in the regulatory procedures already puts us at a disadvantage. So institutions such as SOCAA or associations such as FPIC, these are some of the things now we should start engaging government on. When we look at French beans, if it takes 49 steps, which are some of these steps that are redundant? Which ones are repetitive? Which ones are not even necessary? So that's why I say that if our smallholders are able to indulge us and let us know that it has become very chaotic because they need the same document 5 times from, so if we can have government now collapsing those functionalities into one institution, then we cost that transition. So you find that there are sufficient cost savings even from that end. But you realize that that is something that needs to be picked up on an advocacy standpoint. And at this point, I'll just give an example. During COVID, just by revising a few processes at KEFIS for facilitating exports, exporters were able to save up to 24,000 Kenya shillings. And what they did, KEFIS never introduced any new law. They never repealed any law. All they just did is increase efficiencies in the access to documentary compliance. So one of the things was that you are required to go and pay in person. So with the pandemic and now the encouragement of going cashless, so now all payments are being done through M-Pesa, and that in itself, and in addition to other processes, so this resulted in a savings of 24,000 Kenya shillings. So imagine if we constantly reviewed these regulatory procedures for exporters, we could get to as low as even 3. And maybe as we exit on that one, I'd just like to give an example in the coffee sector. So you find that for us, exporting coffee in Kenya takes 66 days, 66 steps, and it translates to just around the number. It takes 66 days from the day you express intention to the day you're able to export. But in Rwanda, it takes only, it should be 20 or less than 20. So imagine a Rwandese smallholder farmer in coffee is able to export 3 times before a Kenyan exporter is able to export even just once. So we need to interrogate these processes as associations and as advisory institutions, so that when we quantify now these processes into money, then we're able to track how much savings are we also making for the farmer, and by extension increasing competitiveness, because it means that even government procedures and processes now become much more efficient. Next slide, please. So this slide is just looking at the regulatory requirements, and this is just also a contribution to the revising of these kinds of processes. So you find that these for you to be able to export to the UK, you need to have already observed all the 50 measures. So you need, and this is just a screenshot of just some of them, but in total, the summation is 50. So you can imagine if you require 50 in the UK and maybe an additional 49, I think some of our 49 also feed into this 50. So we also need to do that comparison. What is left out in our, on the side of the Kenyan government that is not corresponding to what the regulatory requirements. And these regulatory requirements are mostly policy measures other than tariffs that have an impact on the quantity and the value of goods traded globally. So you find that over time, international trade, we have seen the decline of tariffs as a restrictive measure to trade, but an increase of non-tariff measures. These are the regulatory requirements. Those kinds of demands on social and environmental competencies of an organization. So those are some of the things that are coming into force from a regulatory standpoint that are an obstacle to trade. So in what ways can we, how can we synergize the requirements of, for example, to access the UK market with our documentary compliance, as we have seen in the InfoTrade portal? So we reduce the burden on the smallholder and increase the ability to export faster and more volumes. So the next slide, please. Yeah, so this map is just, this particular slide is just looking at Kenya's production potential. So from this, we can see that the market is the greatest potential. We have the Netherlands, we have the UK, and we have the US. So those are some of the things, even as we explore these kinds of markets, what are the underlying regulatory requirements that are hindering us from exercising our full potential? Then maybe just to mention on something Apollo had talked about on the seasonality and the seasons that perform very well for Kenya. So you find that our top seasons, the highest demand is between September to March. So you find that this is the fall and the winter season in Europe. So why we enjoy high volumes to export is because countries such as Spain are no longer producing because of weather conditions. So you find that we are able to very easily, and even North Africa, there is significant impact on of the winter on the ability to produce. So what does that mean by extension? That as a country, we need to leverage the period between September to March to maximize our production potential. Another thing you'll notice about this particular period is that it is a dry season in Kenya compared to what Apollo had alluded to, the season where we have the long rains. So you find that as we maximize on this, then this is also a climate change intervention space where we can lobby government now to make irrigation equipment much more affordable. Maybe we could also mainstream irrigation equipment as part of the incentive scheme when the national tax policy is developed, because it is easily justifiable because of the value of GDP contribution the horticulture brings in. So as an incentive to ensure that our horticulture production is all year round, and even encourage policies to encourage water storage. How can the horticulture sector lead charge on this? And you find that because of their value and contribution to GDP, it is very easy to justify why irrigation equipment and access to even the very small holder levels can increase. then you also find that the period when it is summer in Europe, we also enjoy very constrained access to the market, because we have a lot of competition coming in from even other European markets, because at that point the weather allows them to also produce. So that's maybe, could we look at alternative markets in that period, or in what ways can we also now increase that differentiation perhaps now then? And with value add interventions, how do they compare with the technologies from, for example, the European market? So those are some of the things that going forward we need to also take into consideration. So the last slide. So with all this, what is coming out very strongly is that with trade facilitation, there are so many angles, and there is need as a smallholder farmer in the French beans commodity value chain, that there is need to conduct intensive or thorough market and market access analysis, and considering all the emerging trends, that is digital transformation, the move towards low carbon emissions globally, and the commitment to do that, just as a way of building resilience for enterprises and ensuring that as policies come into effect in other countries, they don't affect your ability to do that. However, you find that the cost of doing this kind of market analysis for an individual farmer is they are very prohibitive. It's very, very expensive. So this presents an opportunity for business member organizations such as FPIC, SOCAA, FPC to do these kinds of analysis for their members. And then now we are able to address the issues that Apollo had raised on the being speculative businessmen. So this way we are able to do business and conduct our exports from an information standpoint, and also map, as the changes happen in the global policy making space, we are able to now cascade that and do projections. What are the implications of these kinds of things on our ability to continue export? Then for SMEs, it now becomes very essential for you to become a member of an association, because you realize that the ability to absorb some of these costs can also has a knock-on effect on your ability to become profitable when you go at it alone. But when you're together in an association or in a cooperative society, then these kinds of costs are spread through, then you enjoy economies of scale. So market access for 100 farmers is easier, and it's even more affordable to cost than when you're doing it for one farmer. If it is interventions in climate change for continued business access, it's easier to source irrigation equipment for 100 or 1,000 farmers as opposed to when you're doing it for one farmer. So then also what this is bringing out is the need for extension services and advisory that does not only stop at production, but cuts across all nodes of the value chain, that it needs to keep abreast with the emerging global trends in order to remain relevant. Then finally, it's important to create synergies across sectors, for example, with ISPAC, so that when we are developing incentives for specific commodity value chains, for example, like the French beans, we now notice that with just access to irrigation equipment, we can do all year round production. So for example, so then with that, the certified Institute of Certified Public Accountants are able to help us quantify, because they are the ones who advise the National Treasury on what to zero rate, what to value, what to zero rate, what to exempt, and what to even have for VAT. So we are able now to do our incentive scheme that is scientifically, that is economically backed. So we know that if horticulture is able to produce throughout the year, then it means increased foreign exchange earnings for the country, increased incomes for the farmer, and across board we're able to create wealth and contribute to economic development. So that's it, Joshua. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Lydia, for that very well thought presentation, quite detailed and to the point as well. Before I release you, Lydia, for a short while, I just have one question for you. When I listened to your presentation, I think there was quite a bit of information shared as far as the trade agreements is concerned. And it looks like a slight slip in a trade agreement would easily put us to a big risk on to how much we can export and to where we can export. And that brings me to just one agreement, which is still hanging somewhere in a balance somewhere. And that is the regional trade agreement, where I think the East African or our neighbors were to be enjoined into one trade agreement for exports to Europe. Maybe I don't want to ask you how far it is, but I would ask you, of what effect would that kind of an agreement have over our opportunities out there?
Okay, thank you very much for that question, Joshua. It actually is one of the agreements that allows us to enjoy preferential access. It's the EU-EAC Economic Partnership Agreement. It's actually tagged as an interim agreement, so it hasn't gone into a full-blown free trade area agreement. And I'm sure you are aware of this, is because our counterparts in the EAC were hesitant, because they realized that a full FTA would mean a liberalization of the markets of the EAC and the EU. So while that is liberalization of trade is generally has to be taken with what do you call it, a pinch of salt, because between unequals it tends to increase inequalities. So you find that being a developing country with member states that are least developing, you find that it's the reason why we could not agree, because whether we have the agreement in place or not, the least developed countries in the EAC, in the East African community, continue to enjoy preferential treatment, access to the European Union under it is called the Generalized Scheme of Preferences. So because by virtue of the fact that they are a least developing country, and that they're allowed to access the markets on tariffs that are either zero tariffs or lower tariffs than what other WTO members enjoy. So you find that for us, we crossed the tier now. We are now lower tier developing country, meaning that our economic development status is higher. Therefore, we can afford the tax obligation or the tax obligation while accessing Europe, markets for developed countries. So you find that is where it puts us at a loggerhead, and it is said that Kenya is not loyal, but you realize that Kenya has to factor in that it doesn't enjoy preferential treatment because it has changed status. So those are some of the things that now become very difficult, because we are members of the community, and it's a customs union. But at the same time, we find some of the decisions when we are going into negotiations, especially that are looking at liberalizing trade or opening up the community for trade, then we are at a disadvantage, because if all the others gang up against us, it limits our ability to expand and grow our markets. I don't know whether that addresses it.
Yeah, for sure, that addresses it. I know it is it's a very complex issue that is being handled at, of course, top levels, and we just wish ourselves the best in trying to resolve those issues. And I would like to just take you to one question that has been asked by one of the panelists, and I think during your presentation, you mentioned some 50 regulations in the UK. Only for French beans, and that question is coming from Jane. Does this also apply to other horticultural products, or is it only for French beans?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question, Joshua. So you realize that for what happens for you to be able to understand the regulatory requirements, it is classified through a system called the Harmonized System of Classification. So you realize, if Winnie, you could please go back to that slide 6, you realize that it is for a very specific, in fact, this is for a very specific variety of French beans. So when you're looking for regulatory requirements, this is only for this particular variety of these particular French beans, and that is the Vigna. I don't know how it is pronounced, Vigna SPP. So for you to understand, so there, and we export 3, this is classified. For the UK market, we have 3 tariff line classifications. So that number that says, that reads 0708, Wing is not able to share again. So from that from the number of from the presentation, so when you're searching, you search for a very specific commodity. So you may find that for peas, maybe it is 50 or less. For flowers, it's different. So it is per commodity classification. And then it is advisable, rather than use the World Customs classification of 6 letters. I hope you're able to access that slide before we move on to the next question. Rather than use 6, it is advisable, especially as an exporter, you use the national tariff line for a commodity. That way you're able to get the most present regulatory requirements for a specific commodity. What normally happens if you don't do this, slide 6, if you don't do this, by the time you're getting to the border point in the destination market, if you had picked a wrong tariff line, then you find that, and you find that in some instances you could be blocked from accessing that market. So it is important that we become very, very specific. So when you go to the ITC market access map, you will have that option. You enter the market you first enter. There's an entry for the importing country, exporting country, destination market, and then product. So you'll realize that the first, yes, that one, please enlarge if you can. So it says that for product 070820. So up until there, that is the international, the H6 harmonized system code 6, that is for the commodities at the World Customs Union. But so that we can get the specific regulatory requirements in the UK for our product, we use their national tariff line. So you see, it goes all the way. It includes another 2 zeros and 10. So this is for that specific one. So you find that if we looked for peas, we would get a different total number of measures required. For avocado is different also. So that is why it is important to use tools like the market access map for exact regulatory number of requirements. Then this makes trade more predictable, and it reduces the number of surprises when you get to the border point in the destination market. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Lydia. I think you guys are doing a great job behind the scenes, and we just wish you very well in all this effort that you're making to put us, of course, in the and sustain us in the global map as the greatest, or one of the greatest exporters of vegetables to the destined markets. I would give you a few minutes to take a breath, and between now and the next 10 minutes, I would like to interact a little bit with our audience. This is a bit different from what we have done before, where we only had the panelists and the questions coming in online. We thought of having a bit of interaction with our audience. I'm not sure if Winnie or Ricky, that facility is on, so that we can have at least a few interactions from the audience. Is it possible for today, Ricky or Winnie? Okay, maybe as they think of answering that, we want to look at the some polls. We have been interacting with our audience offline. Some of that has been done via the Twitter handle. And for the panelists, we received some response actually from the audience. And I would like to just ask some of the questions that the audience had put across via our Twitter handles. And the first one was, what are the major market requirements to be considered by exporters? I think Apollo has quite handled that bit. But of course, since it is a question, maybe Apollo, if you're still in, you could just summarize, in a few words, the bullet points just only what are the major market requirements to be considered by exporters.
Thanks, Joshua. Very key market requirements that need to be considered by exporters: market compliance, understanding the import regulations, understanding the importing country regulations, understanding the local regulations, food safety requirements. There's food safety, environmental, and social compliance issues. Those are very critical to be able to be to have an export business.
Thank you, Apollo. And the next question that we also received, which of course was asked quite a number of times, is what will it take for Kenya to expand trade volumes and value for French beans? How would we ensure increased productivity? And I think we have also touched on this subject in our previous presentations, where one of the panelists, David, went through quite elaborate on this subject. It keeps coming back. Can someone mute the background noise? Yeah, what will it take for Kenya to expand trade volumes? Are we sufficient on these volumes?
Are you asking me that, Joshua, or is it open to?
It's a general question. It's a general question, so anyone can pick it up. And maybe I should add the second question so that both are tackled at the same time. What are the main pesticides What are the main pesticide use compliance issues for importing countries? And I also guess you've also touched on that. But again, as bullet, what are those main pesticide compliance issues that we face?
So to start with the how to expand our French bean market, I wouldn't say we need to expand our French. We just need to expand our overall exports basket through various diversified market potential. We have not yet fully explored Middle East. We've not yet fully explored areas in the Far East Asia. We've not fully explored, even Europe is not fully explored. We have the African market that is yet to be explored. So it's not just the French beans. We need to look at the entire food basket that we can take advantage of. With regard to pesticides, pesticides are poisons. They are meant to kill, and therefore the responsible use of pesticide is very important. So there are products that have been registered at Pest Control Products Board that are been registered for use in beans and also for particular pests that have been identified. So if somebody has can access the PCPB website, you are able to tell which products have been registered for use and for what and for which product. Those ones are all clear. In the European Union, they also have restricted, and they have restricted the range of products that can be used that are allowed to be used for products that they are consuming. So again, there is a database, the EU database, that also has products that can be are allowed for use. So now one can filter from what is registered for use in Kenya and then what is allowed for use in the European Union or for the market of destination, because each market has its own list of products that they are allowed for use, and they also have a list of products that are prohibited and withdrawn and restricted. That's the overall dynamics in terms of the pesticide usage is concerned. Thanks,
Okay.
Joshua.
Thank you very much, Apollo, for that good answer. I think that actually answers most of the questions that we had on the chat. And I would, at this moment, just request our audience to look at the link that we have posted, where we have a small survey. Actually, it has very, very few questions on it. It's just your name, the company that you work for, your email address, and and just telling us what are your expectations. If this is meeting your expectations, then we actually need to know that. Of course, there are about 5 or 6 questions that you need to answer. Some of them are just a matter of ticking a box. So it is not going to take a lot of your time. It is very important for us to be able to improve on our service to you. So please take your time and do that. Just as we kind of wind up, I would like to give again our panelists just some time to give us their final chats as we wind up, and I will come back to you on the next steps. So let me start again with Lydia. Just give us your last words for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Joshua. And maybe to start off, I'll just like to weigh in on that question on productivity. And maybe going forward, just one of the things that we could look at improving the productivity of French beans could also be in developing varieties that are climate change resilient. So you find that French beans are normally grown in temperate climates, but as the temperatures continue to rise, we may lose the resilience and we may need to develop varieties that are commensurate to the rise in temperatures. And pyrethrum has suffered that kind of a problem, and now they're looking towards developing pyrethrum varieties that can cope with the rising temperatures. Then there was a question that I had seen on the chat asking what are some of the initiatives that are happening to maybe just get farmers to work together in exports. I think that is an area that needs to be explored, because you find that a lot of exporters are companies, and in the interim, the smallholder farmers can be enjoined as in outgrower schemes of existing exporters. But I think as part of enlarging our volumes and value traded of French beans, we need to now start looking into, can we have cooperative societies of farmers in the French beans commodity value chain? Then we also, I think it will be a way of also just diversifying the number of players that are involved going forward. So finally, I just like to really encourage the farmers to really be part of an association, so that you're able to also stay informed on these changing trends. So if you are in the dark, it becomes really difficult and makes trade unpredictable. So it leads to massive losses unnecessarily. So you can start mitigating that by just being part of an association. Then you're also able to join your voice to many other voices to push for a better and more business-friendly environment. And it's important also to start working on ensuring that you are taking measures to be climate change resilient. You are taking measures to also just understand issues of digital, the digital evolution and how it's likely to affect your businesses. So that said, I am really grateful for the opportunity, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Lydia, for that wise counsel at the end of the session. Before I give up all of the chance to finalize, I would remind our audience again that you are able to raise your hand if you have, sorry. I would like to remind our audience that you are able to raise your hand, and we will be able to give you a slot or a short opportunity to talk to us. So our technicians at the back are on watch out for those who will be raising their hands and would like to contribute a word or two. It will be very brief because we have just a few minutes to go. So in the meantime, as we wait for anybody with a burning issue to come up, Apollo, could you just give us some of your last words, and then we will summarize the whole session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joshua and the audience. Just pretty quickly, I think food safety for me is a very passionate topic, and just for us to ensure food safety and avoid environmental damage, we need to guarantee that our products have limited application of crop protection products. There are controls that will be carried out not only internally but also by the importing countries, And these controls are carried out to ensure that all foods marketed are safe and are in compliance with all applicable regulatory requirements. There are also compulsory plant health checks that are carried out on products. So we need to be very vigilant in our practice, especially whether we are farming, whether we are exporters, that we need to be very, very vigilant with our practices that will be able to guarantee that we maintain this market. The market currently is what about is close to is worth about 40 billion 40 billion shillings. And so if we lose that, we lose a very significant part of our GDP. And therefore, I would just like to urge all of us to be very vigilant, to keep a close eye on ensuring that food safety, environmental aspects are definitely things that are of concern, not only for local consumption, but also for products that are also meant for export. A lot of the times we concentrate so much on the export business. We look at how we are able to put in systems for the export business, and while jeopardizing what we consume locally, that has significant impact, even to what the importers are saying. If we are not able to take care of ourselves, then how are we able to take care of the outside factor? Thank you very much, Joshua.
Thank you, Apollo. It was a great pleasure having both you and Lydia. I think you guys have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge that will really help this sector to progress. And we believe in your leadership in both, wherever both of you are working. We hope to have you again soon or in the near future. And most likely next week, we could probably have both of you again, because we will be getting into another crop, which is actually the peas. So we will be handling peas alongside French beans. We will still have issues on French beans, especially those that are dealing with optimizing the productivity. Because if the market is there for us, we are meeting the standards. We have the trade agreements that allow us to venture into those markets. Then we should not be drawn back because we are not able to supply, and not only to supply, but to supply safe quality and giving the best offers. Of course, we realize that competition is creeping up in this segment, and we should be able to deal with that at the level that we are engaged in, and that we will maintain our position as one of the leading exporters. In the absence of any burning question from any audience, I would like to take this opportunity to once more thank ITC, SheTrades, for allowing these sessions to continue. And we value your support, and we will partner with you we are with you on a long haul to be able to reach as many as possible, as many farmers as possible, as many enterprises, and especially women enterprises. We will coordinate and partner with you all along. I want to take this opportunity also to thank the SOCAA fraternity. I know most of you are also listening somewhere in the background, and this is the way we are heading, that we would like to be involved very much in empowering those who are involved in this entire value chain, and more so with the emphasis on small and medium enterprises that are run by ladies. So if ladies are in the group or in the team, please put yourself in a position that you are able to be picked and involved in the entire discussion. If Ricky is available and he would like to have some word for us as the CEO, then please, Ricky, take the time before we close. Okay. If he's not, then I would like to say thank you very much, everybody, for participating. And please remember to fill in the Pulse survey link. Thank you very much to everybody, and have a good evening. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.
And if Ricky, you're still there, please, you can